What is a woman? Is a woman bold?
How dare you?
Is she courageous?
I was arrested on December 1st, 1955.
She's a fighter, risk taker, lawmaker.
Were always rationalized as favors to women.
Educator, creator.
Anybody asked what I thought, I would write it.
You see a woman, she's a leader.
We, the people, have the power to build a better future.
She's a believer, high achiever.
Thank you for this award.
More a giver than a receiver. Woman of hope.
For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it.
For the next generation to not be so cold. Women give love.
I've given it to everyone I know. I love this book.
Women give light. Women are the essence of life. Is she everything that we said she wasn't?
Who will have the power to shape our children for the next 4 or 8 years of their lives?
Or is she everything that she said she wanted? Just look in her soul. We can see her light shine. What is a woman?
I just love it. And as Joyce said in her response to us, hear me, I am woman, hear me roar, as Helen Reddy said. So what a way to begin. For those of you, I think everyone that is here might know us, but I'm Jean Vibrett, and I'm the chairman of the programs committee this year. And Sigrid Morantz is our president this year. And I'm happy to introduce Patty Terrell, who is the president of Women's Journey Foundation. And we learned about Patty, well, just a little bit. She founded it in 2002, I believe, wasn't it, Patty? And their mission is we strengthen confidence and resilience in women and girls of all ages. And their vision is an equitable world where women and girls are celebrated, embrace their value, and realize their purpose and potential. And Vivian Clickett has introduced Patty to us. And when Sigrid and I got together to talk about this program, and we met Patty and saw some of the work that she's done, we really felt that how she speaks to women and girls about history and the importance of it, it just really clicked with us on wanting to go ahead with this program. And then Sigrid had sent along to me an opinion written by a 17-year-old girl that was posted in the Washington Post. And in that opinion, there was a question from a 7-year-old girl of, do women exist in history? And with that, it really got me going on just the very simple topic of Women's History Month. Why is it important? And when I was telling some people that I was going to put that question out to the membership, there was sort of this answer of, well, duh. Of course we know why there's Women's History Month. Or, I don't know. Let me think about that. But then Joyce Bartlett said it better in her response to the question. And she said, Women's History Month is a public acknowledgement of what women have achieved in contemporary society. For me, this means I don't have to go searching in the dusty archives of the library as I did in high school to find those women whose accomplishments changed the world. It's all there before me. And in a more personal way, it acknowledges me and what I, as a woman, have achieved for myself, my family, and my community. So thank you, Joyce, for giving us some input. One of the other things for myself personally, when we got working on this, was, and as we all know, there's so much information out there about women's history. What direction are we going to go in? What are we going to talk about? But on one of the flyers from the Women's Journey Foundation, and it's for a program that they run for young girls or girls 8 to 18, the I Can Girls Conference. I read some statistics, and this is what really got me going, thinking about what are we doing with women's history in our world today? And that is, there was 100% increase in teenage girl suicide between 2007 and 2017. There was a 90% incidence of eating disorders found in teen girls, and 70% of girls are suffering from low self-esteem. And those numbers really started affecting me. And then as I started reading more and more about Women's History Month and why it's important, I'm also seeing from a number of different avenues that there is a bit of a lack of women in our history books and what these kids are learning. And when I looked at the statistics, it really got me going. You know, yes, somebody said to one of the members I was talking to, she's not here, was saying, well, there is so much about women's history now. It's all out there. And everyone's writing about it and everybody's talking about it. My kids can do anything they want to do. Yeah, but there's some missing elements there. And that's where I think paying attention to what's going into our history books is a very important part of this. So let's see. Sorry, I'm going to jump around just a little bit. Well, Patty, how about you take a little bit of time and introduce yourself, introduce the making of HerStory, and then introduce this first clip that we're going to watch.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for this invite today. I have grown so passionate about women's history because of my own lack of knowledge when I first discovered how many women I didn't know about. Women who made pivotal changes. And I had brought this one person's name to Jean and to Sigrid. Frances Perkins is one of my favorite women in history. And does everybody know who she was? Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't, but just wanted to just basically, this was kind of the motivating factor to create educational materials and actually produce a play that involves women and girls together playing the roles of women in history. And AAUW and I go back several years. You had a national conference here in Irvine. Lily Ledbetter was one of your speakers. We had a play called We Did It For You at the time. Mm-hmm. And Lily Ledbetter was the lead character in our play, and Lily Ledbetter was in the audience. So needless to say, we were all freaking out, hoping we were representing her well. And actually, she and I became quick friends. And we have the pleasure of honoring women in our local communities, but also national women. And Lily Ledbetter has been honored along with Dolores Huerta. And so we do this every year. And then all of a sudden a pandemic hit. And we had to figure out how we were going to do this play without an audience. And so we decided to film it in a studio here in Santa Ana. And it was 3 days worth of filming. It was sort of a rush job. And then we had to get the editing done just in time for March 12th is when we aired Making HerStory 2021. And overnight, women in 7 different countries viewed this production, and from the United States all the way to Saudi Arabia. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. And the reason why we are so passionate about this project is because it is a way to get everyone educated, women and girls alike, and men too, and boys. This is important for them to know this information. We saw direct correlations. Since we focus on this girls' self-esteem program, we realized there was a correlation of their lack of knowledge of women in history. So that's why we wanted to integrate this program, make it a multi-generational program. And we're very proud of where it's going. And it's also great to see girls up on the stage portraying the roles of these women in history, because after they're done with this production, there's a notable difference in their attitude towards history, women in history, and being represented. So yeah, so that's where we're at right now. Next year, and we've been invited to Heroes Hall at the fairgrounds, Orange County Fairgrounds. So we are going to be highlighting women in military history next year. And we're also going to be doing another event to represent women in music history. So anyway, more to come on that. So I think right now we're going to play a clip, which involves RBG and Nellie Bly. And I hope you enjoy it.
Good evening. Tonight we'll hear argument in case number, well, I've lost count. The women versus his story. Tonight we shall hear oral arguments, testimonies, from women throughout history on behalf of themselves and future generations who will benefit from hearing such stories, take inspiration from them, springboard off of them, and pass them on. To record their oral accounts, cementing their places in the HerStory books, I call upon investigative journalist, world traveler, and war correspondent, Nellie Bly.
Nellie Bly, much obliged. When I was 20 years old, back when I was humble Elizabeth Jane Cochrane, a man wrote to an advice column in the Pittsburgh Dispatch. Distraught, he asked what he should do with his 5 unmarried daughters. The youngest was 18, the oldest, gasp, 26. He signed his query, anxious father. The columnist's response was that women were only meant to be homemakers, and then made a joke about the disposal of excess females. So, I submitted an anonymous, scathing rebuttal. The following day, Pittsburgh Dispatch's managing editor printed a notice in the paper asking for the anonymous scribe to reveal herself. I showed up at the paper's headquarters the next morning, a nervous Nellie. I needn't have been. They offered me a job. I titled my first column, The Girl Puzzle. What shall we do with our girls? The anxious father still wants to know. Girls, since the existence of Eve, have been a source of worriment to themselves as well as to their parents. As to what shall be done with them? If girls were boys, quickly would it be said, start them where they will. They can, if ambitious, win name and fortune. How many great and wealthy men can be pointed out who started in the depths? But where are the many women? Instead of gathering up the real smart young men, gather up the real smart girls. Pull them out of the mire and give them a shove up the ladder of life, and be amply repaid both by their success and their unforgetfulness to those who held out the helping hand. Employ them in every industry, in every profession. We are dynamic, ambitious, and capable. Oh, and worthy of an equal wage. So, where are the women? They are here. When I started writing for the Dispatch, I was assigned to write a column on the women's sphere, which meant hairstyles, homemaking, hosting, gossip. But I wanted to interview women, all kinds of women, to tell their stories and show the world their complexities, struggles, and triumphs. That is my role this evening.
Well, thank you, Patty, for setting that up. Do you have any comments on Nellie?
Does everyone know who Nellie Bly is? She's a real character. She was a real journalist in around the 1890s. And remember the story of Phineas Fogg and 80 Days Around the World? Mm-hmm. She really did it in less than 80 days alone as a woman journalist.
So I love the statement, what shall we do with our girls? And Nellie's whole idea is just let them do what they do best. Let them be. There was one of the other comments that came in, and Joyce, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit from yours once again. And Joyce said, what Women's History Month is for my daughter, who has more freedom than I. It confirms that she can make whatever choices she wants. And for my sons, it shows that women are equal partners, deserving their respect and support, which they do. Now, I did see in the chat, someone had written, where is it? Was it
Priya.
Pamela?
Yeah.
Was it Priya?
Priya.
Oh,
His
okay.
story should be our story.
His story. So Priya, did you want to make any comments about that? You can unmute yourself.
Well, here I am. So basically, women's history, there's so much that we have to do that are firsts, but you go back and without women, it's that whole concept that Nicholas, I can't remember his last name, the journalist and his
Christoph.
wife, that women hold up, Nicholas Kristof, that would hold up half the sky, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, just because we've never been acknowledged in millennia, it's one humanity. There wouldn't be men without women. There wouldn't be any of the advances that we have without women. I mean, if you look at Watson and Crick, it was Watson, Crick, and Franklin, but they still say Watson and Crick, right? You look at computers and Ida Lovelace and all these different advances that we've had, and women were always behind the scenes, but they were brilliant and they were doing what they could and doing more than the men did in a lot of cases, but never got credit.
Thank you.
I do think like right now though, I think what I really worry about is we have all these choices, but the beauty industrial complex women have to have standards of beauty and spend a lot of time on grooming and stuff that men are absolutely freed from those constraints.
Mhm.
Men don't have to wear high heels unless they want to, like Prince. I mean, Hillary, I mean, why should it matter what the heck Hillary Clinton wears? I certainly don't look at Mitch McConnell as a fashion statement. But I do worry that our younger generation, they're being self-subjugated and subjugated by this whole Instagram culture that instead of looking out at things and being the best they can be, they're trying to look the best they can. And I feel that takes away so much
energy. Yep.
Too much energy, too much mental. Like, imagine if all that was put towards solving world hunger or diplomacy or scientific advances or climate change instead of what Instagram filter should I use?
Right.
Patty, you've been out working with the young girls. How do you feel about what Priya had to say?
Well, I think she's spot on. Because I think you might all be aware of the fact that the rising demographic of suicides are girls 10 to 14 years of age. There's a reason for that. I believe a lot of it is social media. And I hope I'm not going too far off topic, but going back to the idea of young girls, especially knowing about women in history. What stunned me is I'd go to college campuses and interview girls and ask one simple question: what woman in US history inspired you the most? And 9 times out of 10, they were stumped and embarrassed that they didn't know more. But, I went through that same level of embarrassment. Why don't I know about these women in history? But once you take that first initial curiosity and do the research, it's amazing how your world will open up. And then that kind of leads to more stories that can actually be inspiring to a young girl's self-esteem. If she knows that these women had to go through tremendous obstacles just to invent something or to get a job in a certain workplace, or to just have any opportunities that were available to her other than becoming a mother and a wife. It's just, I think that there's a whole world out there of opportunities for girls to learn about what they are capable of, which again, leads to a good, healthy self-esteem.
Mm-hmm. Sigrid, I think it's time maybe you introduce us to Michaela.
Okay.
Please.
So this is a letter to the opinion section of the Washington Post, and it was published on January 1st of this year. And it's from a 17-year-old high school student in Washington. I'm sorry, in Virginia, Alexandria, Virginia. And her name is Michaela Wells, and she's a senior at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. And the title of her article is, "In My Advanced High School History Textbook, It's as If Women Didn't Exist." So I'm going to read from this, and we're going to split this into several parts. So the first part is Michaela speaking. "Once, after second grade history class, I came home and jokingly asked, 'So did women just not exist?' 10 years later, the question stands, but I'm no longer laughing. I'm a high school senior who recently completed AP US History, whose curriculum is the national standard for advanced high school history education. Although my textbook, branded AMSCO and published by a company called Perfection Learning, it isn't endorsed by AP or the College Board. It closely follows the official AP US History curriculum. In this advanced text is a 20-page chapter on World War II. As I read about Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Pan American Conferences, and the war's impact on society, I came across a paragraph creatively titled, 'Women.' Merely 100 words later, women were abandoned. I was bothered that the writers had deemed 100 words sufficient for teaching students everything important about women during that era. What bothered me even more was my own lack of surprise. Perhaps some would say, of course, there are fewer famously influential women than men throughout history, considering the cultural norms that long created gender-based divisions and hierarchies. But that's a lazy assumption. Curious, I did the least I could do, Googled important women in American history, and obtained myriad results, which raises the question, why did the writers of my textbook neglect to do the same? Or if they did bother, why was this information excluded? If education reflects our societal values, and if textbooks provide the foundation for our education, then the AP US History is perpetuating for all students the idea that women are comparatively worthless. Worse, it's sending the message to girls that their stories and accomplishments don't matter. After encountering the women paragraph, I decided to conduct an admittedly unscientific experiment. I asked questions of about 30 students from several Northern Virginia schools, half of them girls, half of them boys, ranging in age from 6 to 17 years old. Question 1, who are some important people in American history? Question 2, who are some important women in American history? Note, the second question is one I shouldn't have had to break out, but I suspected it was necessary. We'll get back to Michaela in a little while.
Patty, on your website somewhere, I saw a quote by Shireen Dodson. "If we want our girls to benefit from the courage and wisdom of the women who came before them, we have to share their stories." This relates back to Michaela's opinion and those stories not being shared enough within our textbooks. And do you have any comment on that?
Well, last I checked on the stats, less than 5% of educational materials include women. And here's an even more stark number. In 3,500 years of written history, women are represented by 1/2 of 1%. Now, we have the internet, so we can do the research ourselves. But the question is, how many people are curious? How many, and what's the level of importance that we put on women's history? And I'm not so sure if that many people are interested, because I know the educational system, they have a certain curriculum that they stick to. What's it going to take for them to recognize more women? And I don't know. I don't have the answer to that question. But I am concerned that young girls are growing up not knowing who these very valuable stories, how important they are. And I put a quote in the chat too: is every time a girl opens a book and reads a womanless history, she learns that she is worth less.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen that with our girls in our conferences and when we go to college campuses to interview them. They're just downright embarrassed that they don't have more information.
Right. Mm-hmm. There was another comment in the chat from Priya about how many educators are women and why don't we teach this ourselves? They're the ones teaching AP history.
Mm-hmm. Good question.
I also read, my husband was reading a book and he shared this with me. It's called The Code Breaker. I don't know how many of you know The Code Breaker. It's about Jennifer Doudna. I'm not sure how to say it. Doudna, thank you so much. Gene Editing and the Future of the Human Race. And she was one of a team of 2 women that were the first team of 2 women to get the Nobel Prize in chemistry without men being in there. So she was saying, or he was saying in this book, and I thought this was kind of interesting. It just goes to show that there's still this underlying message that's out there. Women in science tend to be shy about promoting themselves, and that has serious costs. A study in 2019 of more than 6 million articles with women as the principal authors showed that they are less likely to use self-promoting terms such as novel, unique, unprecedented to describe their work, which obviously then is saying that men they're more willing to boast about their work. The trend is especially true for articles in the most prestigious journals, which almost by definition, further research by definition, the further the research is there, it's almost groundbreaking. In the highest impact journals it's published, the most important cutting edge research, women are 21% less likely to use this positive language. Now you think the women that have gotten to this point where they're really recognized, they're being published in the highest levels and they're still shy about promoting themselves. So there again, we don't have the answers, and today is definitely not a day about answers, but it's just a day about thinking about what needs to be done within our education. And I do believe that a lot of this does come from outside school system. And so this is where, Patty, thank you so much for your organization. And there's so many other organizations that really are reaching out to young girls. And I love hearing that we're also including young boys also in this, because they do need to hear these words and understand.
Yeah. And here's some more out of the chat. Also, women and people with ethnic sounding names are less likely to be published, period. Journals should select anonymous articles and then publish with bylines.
Yeah. I actually have some stats on the breakdown of ethnicity and representation as far as in the history books. 63% of women that are mentioned are white. African Americans, 25%. Hispanics, 8%. Native Americans, 4%. And here's the most shocking number of all: Asian American, 0.5%.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Here's another comment in the chat from Alice.
Yeah,
educators have to stick to state standards, and we need to get those changed. AAUW's mission is not just about educating women and girls, but includes advocacy, which is where we get our laws passed. And that's a nice segue to some comments that Alice had sent in about why we need to have women's history promoted at all. You know, why do we need that? Why do we need a Black History Month? Why do we need any of it? and her answer was great. We need them because history continues to be written by privileged white men whose efforts to maintain supremacy start with preventing or trying to prevent women and people of color from accomplishing anything in the first place. Their tools have been denial of access while promoting the false narrative of white male superiority. But some women and people of color have managed to overcome the obstacles and have made astonishing contributions in science, technology, music, art, war, political and social movements, and more. But of course, white men also appointed themselves the recorders and reporters of history. So they've quite successfully covered up the accomplishments and contributions of everyone else.
Alice, while you're there, would you be willing to speak to your comment here in the chats? Just any opinion on how do we get this moving in education, and what is possibly AAUW California or AAUW National doing towards this? Is it anything that's discussed?
Actually don't know. I mean, they're very active with Title IX stuff and helping out in lawsuits when people,
Sue for discrimination. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good question. I think I hadn't really thought about it until this came up, but it is the state standards. I know in the classroom, I mean, it's pretty laid out what needs to be taught. That doesn't mean people can't add to it. I didn't mean to say that like having more teachers talk about women's history isn't possible. I don't know. I mean, yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer to that. I don't know what AAUW does. I don't know what we can do except talk about it and care about it. Yeah.
But it kind of ties into the DEI portion of AAUW, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, of which Alice is our branch chair.
Yeah. Patty, I think Patty raised her hand.
I was really motivated. Last year, my husband and I went on a museum run in New York and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. And I was kind of surprised that more women were represented in those, and especially in the Smithsonian. Now, I think a lot of you know they're going to be building a museum at the Grand, in the Smithsonian area. I think it's 10 years out, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's put together by the National Women's History Museum. The Women's Journey Foundation, we want to build a museum in Orange County. So we already have a committee formed that's looking into that. We're working on our focus groups, our feasibility report, but we feel that this is a way to do it. But we want to make it different than most museums. We want to create an interactive experience, because you know how it is when you go and you can listen to someone talk and they might have a really inspiring story or message, but when you have an experience, it stays with you emotionally, right? And you tend to remember that more. So what we want to do is create an interactive experience for kids so they can see for themselves what it was like to march in the suffrage movement, or what it was like to march in the 1970s during the women's liberation movement, or what it was like to be, Julia Child, one of the first women chefs on television, or, and the list can go on, but we want to create an experience for these kids. And we have something planned, hopefully, fingers crossed, around 2025, 26.
Hope I'm still here.
Thank you. Yeah.
There's another comment in the chat from Steph. California textbooks go through a 3-tiered review by panels of outside reviewers, then by the state's Instructional Quality Commission, and finally for approval by the State Board of Education. We need to get people on those review boards.
Yes.
Absolutely. Part of our political action, AAUW is political but not partisan. And for the things that are mission critical for AAUW, we do have our public policy people and our lobbyists in Sacramento and Washington. And this has to be at the top of their list if we're going to change anything about women's history in the textbooks.
Okay, well, I think now is time for another little video clip.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe you'd all enjoy a video clip about the first woman to be named Man of the Year for the Data Processing Management Association.
Who is our first witness, Justice Ginsburg? Are they witnesses?
Well, a woman is witness to her own life, is she not?
The only one.
And now, from the cosmos to cyberspace, our next witness holds an incredible list of honors. She was awarded the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. She was the first woman awarded the National Medal of Technology. She received at least 40 complimentary degrees. A guided missile destroyer was named after her. She was awarded a posthumous Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016. And in 2017, Yale renamed Calhoun College in her honor. And it all started with a computer. Please welcome the Queen of Software, Navy Rear Admiral, and computer scientist, Amazing Grace Murray Hopper.
Well, now you didn't mention my personal favorite. The Data Processing Management Association named me their first ever Man of the Year.
Let me try that again. Please welcome the Data Processing Management Association's Man of the Year, Grace Murray Hopper.
Thank you.
Good evening, Admiral Hopper. Before we get started, I have one preliminary question. What is a computer programmer? A computer is someone who calculates.
Oh, no, Miss Bly. A computer is a machine. It processes instructions so it can perform certain tasks. Think of a player piano. The music notations are the instructions, and the piano, the machine, executes those instructions and outputs music. Now, as the programmer, I'm the one who feeds those instructions through code into the computer.
Oh, I see. I think.
Explaining 100 years of computer technology to someone from the 19th century, and to those of us who feel like we're from the 19th century, might be your most impressive feat to date, Admiral Hopper.
I went through naval training when I was almost 40. This is nothing.
So what sort of tasks do these computers perform?
Oh, well, they do just about everything now but brush your teeth. They function as calculators, word processors, compute rocket trajectories for the military. They access bank accounts. They give you directions. They predict the weather. And now they act as conduits for unending ranting and whining, which I suppose in some ways is my own darn fault.
How is that your fault?
Oh, I taught the computer how to understand English.
Take us to the beginning. How did you come to teach computers human language?
Well, I was born in New York City in 1906, and my mother loved math. And she passed that passion on to me, so that's where it started. I had always been interested in machines. And I was lucky that my parents thought I should have an education as decent as my brothers, so I went to Vassar, and then I went to Yale for my doctorate. And because Vassar was an all-female institution back then, I was able to get a teaching job there. But when the U.S. entered World War II, I wanted to join the fight because I knew I could make a contribution to the war effort in a way others couldn't. But I was denied for being too old, 34. Well, and too small. But I didn't take no for an answer. I pestered. And finally, in 1943, at age 37, I was made lieutenant. And they sent me to Harvard to work on the Mark I computer. It was the first digital program-controlled computer.
That is quite a machine. How did you know how to work this computer?
Oh, well, I didn't. This was the first one. Had to learn on the fly. My team and I were some of the world's first programmers, although we weren't called programmers back then. The concept had yet to exist.
Is Harvard where you taught the computer English?
No. In 1949, I left Harvard because they offered me no tenure nor promotion. So I went to the Eckert-Mockley Computer Corporation, and I worked on the UNIVAC 1 computer there, and I can see by the look on your face these words are utterly useless to you. But this is where I developed the compiler. See, the compiler is the ticket. It's the thing that translates. Without it, you have to punch in numbers. See, the compiler allows us to use words.
But as a mathematician, numbers must come easy to you. What inspired you to develop the compiler?
Well, 3 reasons. 1, because computer programmers cannot read their own writing. 2, because they can't add. And 3, I'm lazy. As programmers, we copy code. Now, sync the music notes, Miss Bly. We copy code into the computer, but no one could copy the darn codes correctly. A delta symbol would come out like a 4, and a 13 would end up looking like a B, and then you had to add all the addresses when inputting them, and decimals would get mistranslated. And so I'm sitting there looking at this machine whose sole purpose it is to add and copy, and I think, now why the heck aren't I making the machine do it? And that's when I developed AO, the world's first compiler. So in 1952, I had a running compiler and no one could believe it. Well, they refused to believe it. Told me computers could only do arithmetic. So it wasn't until I took that work and used it to develop the Flowmatic BO that the compiler was taken seriously. And we finally could input words rather than those darn math symbols. So computers didn't have to just be for mathematicians. If you could write English or eventually French, German, Spanish, you could use a computer. And this led to the development of COBOL, a universal business language that then became the most widely used computer language in the world. Ms. Bly?
Oh, I'm listening. There is a lot of new information for me to process. Like a computer. See, I get it. So this compiler led to these massive machines in the home?
Oh, no. They're not that big anymore. In fact, you can hold them in the palm of your hand now. You can talk to someone on the other side of the world with them. And you can watch performances on them. You can get more information than you will ever know what to do with on them. And none of this would have been possible without my compiler.
Incredible. You also had quite the naval career.
Well, they couldn't get rid of me. They forced me into retirement due to my age. A common theme in my life. In 1966, I was a commander by then, and that was the saddest day of my life. But one of the happiest days of my life was when they called me back to active duty the very next year. I was 61, and then I was promoted to Commodore by the White House in 1983, and Rear Admiral in 1985. I was the oldest active duty officer in the U.S. And then on 31 August 1986, at age 79, I finally did retire.
And what did you do with your sudden free time?
Oh, I went and got a job.
Grace Murray Hopper, or Amazing Grace, as she was often called, worked as a consultant for the Digital Equipment Corporation until the day she died on January 1st, 1992, at the age of 85. She was buried with full military honors in Arlington National Cemetery.
That was wonderful. Dawn, I'm wondering if you could spotlight me again.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank
You're
you.
on.
Oh, you're on. I'm on. I don't see me. I see you.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Oh, there I am.
Yeah.
Well, how many kids that we know have learned about Admiral Grace? I don't know. Did anybody know about Admiral Grace?
No. Nope.
Yes.
Nope.
Yes. Oh, who said yes?
Steph.
Who said? Oh, Steph said. Thank you. I'm glad you're up on this. Yes. So, Sigrid, I'm going to send it back over to you to finish up Michaela's opinion. Please.
Okay. Good. Well, as you can see, Admiral Grace was not well known by people in this country or anywhere else. So Michaela's survey. So here come the respondents to her first question, and they named a total of 35 men and 1 woman. The girl who mentioned a woman was my 2nd grade cousin, who told me about Amelia Earhart because her substitute teacher had read her class a story about the acclaimed aviator earlier that day. Among the named men, answered varied from a few presidents to lists of activists, scientists, journalists, authors, or other pioneers, role that women too have held, though you might not know it if you attend American schools. Responses to the second question were shocking. Quote, I can't think of any. We didn't really learn about a woman, a 10th grade boy said. As a girl, it's embarrassing I can only name one. a 14-year-old responded. Among those who could name a woman, the list of answers was short. Rosa Parks, she got 9 mentions. Harriet Tubman and Vice President Harris, 5 each. Clara Barton, Earhart, and Susan B. Anthony, 2 apiece. Other respondents included that one person who did that thing for women's rights, the lady who was that president's wife, and who was the Underground Railroad girl. Nearly half my interviewees couldn't name one historically influential woman, and these weren't just little kids. They were average 11 years old.
They weren't little kids. I love it. Well, I'm going to read a response from Alice, another comment of hers that she wrote. Women's History Month is full of lots of gaps in what we're taught as history, giving us all a more accurate understanding of the world. Truth matters. It exposes men's long-standing efforts to maintain male domination. It allows us to celebrate previously hidden accomplishments of women. It provides girls with role models. It shows them that they are not a part of an inferior group. It builds confidence. And it impedes boys' ability to grow up thinking that they have more to offer than girls. I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience that has any comments, either on the Admiral or on Alice's response, or even Alice, if you want to say anything else. No.
Sure, hang on.
The Admiral was amazing. She really, truly was amazing, Grace. And I can't believe that I'd never heard of her before.
And who's speaking? Who was just speaking?
That was Priya.
That was Priya.
Alice,
Priya.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so I keep bringing up boys in my comments for a reason. And that's like, because, you know, I work with STEM stuff and the middle school girls, and it was just always this emphasis on them, like, let's raise yours, and it's important, it's super important. Raise your self-esteem, know that you can do it, etc. But until we can figure out how to get boys to come to, you know, women's science night, they still have to keep fighting. They have to keep fighting. And I mean, so we got to work on both sides. And I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't work on the girls, because we do need to. And but their self-esteem would go up if society expected them, to, you know, or not expected, but had that same confidence in them. Mm-hmm. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Patty had her hand raised. Patty, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, during these, when we have these live productions, we actually really encourage parents to bring their boys. We've had Boy Scouts attend these events, and then we also had teachers give extra credit to attend, and the boys were encouraged to do a book report. So that might be, you know, some kind of an easy fix, but, you know, until we can get the changes done in the curriculum, you know, it might be a wise thing to, you know, circulate videos like this, circulate information about who these tremendous women were. I noticed Priya had put on Hedy Lamarr. A lot of people have no idea other than she was a beautiful movie star, but, you know, if you think about Bluetooth and GPS systems, she's the gal to thank for that. She never got the credit, but she did get into the science. She got some sort of recognition.
Inventors Hall of Fame or something.
Yes, yeah. But as long after she had passed away, she died penniless.
That and her contribution was during World War II.
And then Vera Rubin's.
What was that?
Her contribution let us have Wi-Fi now. She's the reason we have Wi-Fi now and signal jumping and stuff. And then I was just thinking James Webb's beautiful new images. And, you know, Vera Rubin never got a Nobel Prize. Her advisor got the Nobel Prize for all the work she did in her radio telescope that she made, pounding big stakes in the ground, like all over the place. And so there is a Vera Rubin telescope now, but the James Webb should have been called the Vera Rubin.
Yeah.
You know, to Sigrid's point too, when Hetty had presented this idea to the military, they sort of poo-pooed the idea, like, nah, go back to Hollywood,
Make
do
more
your thing in
movies.
Hollywood. And so it's just interesting. They didn't start using that system until the 1960s.
What a shame.
Pretty interesting, huh?
Yeah. Okay. Is it time for Fanny?
Yes, I think it's time for Fanny. Fanny Bliss. All right, we're moving on. We're going to watch a clip on Fannie Lee.
Some women had to wait even
Hamer.
longer still
There
for
she
the right
goes.
to vote. To tell their story and her own, I welcome Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer to the stand.
You again. Me and Miss Witness Box have quite the history. Oh, pardon, her story.
The floor is yours, Mrs. Hamer.
In 1962, a civil rights group called the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, we call them SNCC, came to my small town, Ruleville, Mississippi. They spoke on a Monday night at the William Chapel Church. They were there to teach us how to register to vote. Before that, the 15th Amendment of the Constitution gave the blacks the right to vote. But they put in so many loopholes and rules and made it almost impossible for a black to vote. So much so we were scared to do so. Wouldn't even open our doors for SNCC or the Martin Luther King Jr. Ministries. I was scared myself. But a friend asked me to go, and I'm glad I did. The leader of SNCC, James Foreman, told us that we could vote people out of office, hateful people. And you know, that made so much sense. So when they asked who wanted to go down on a Friday to try to register to vote, I held up my hand.
And what made you hold up your hand when so few others did?
Well, I had this saying, and I always said it. We is sick and tired of being sick and tired. My parents, Jim and Luella Townsend, were sharecroppers. The problem is we never made a profit. The sharecropper made sure of that. One year, my friend who could read and do math kept track of the numbers. She saw that she had made in profit $4,000, and the landowner said she only made $200. We barely had enough money to eat. I was sicker and sicker of the system. The last straw was in 1961. I had this little knot, and I went to the doctor to have it removed, a tumor. After the surgery, I found out they had given me a hysterectomy without my permission. They always did that to black women. 60% of black women in Sunflower County, Mississippi, where I was from, went into the hospital for one thing and came out robbed of having children. Why? I asked, why? They didn't give me no reason why, but I know why. My husband and I wanted to have children, but I was robbed of that. Couldn't get a lawyer. A black woman taking on a white doctor, they can do anything they want and get away with it, but we had no power. So when they asked who wanted to go down and become a registered voter, my hand was already twitching.
What happened when you went to register?
Well, me and 17 others got on a bus to Indianola. When we got there, we were told only 2 could go in. So me and Ernest Davis went in to take the literacy test. But before you could, you had to write down by whom you were employed. So by the time you got back home, you were fired from your job. The registrar came out with this big book that had a section of the state constitution that we had to interpret. The darker your skin, the harder the test. Whites passed, blacks did not. He read a portion of the Constitution on the de facto laws. We know as much about a de facto law as a horse knows about Christmas Day. I flunked, but I studied with the help of SNCC, and after 4 months, I went back to take that test, and I passed. After that, I was determined that I was going to help others register to vote. I knocked on doors. I held hand on the bus to Indianola. I even taught people how to read the Constitution. But the problem was, most people were too scared because they thought if they registered to vote, they would lose their job if they did. I did. Day one after I registered to vote, the landowner came and told me I had to leave that very night if I didn't take my name off the voter's registration book. I told him, I didn't go to register to vote for you. Mayor came out and said, anybody caught taking any voter registration classes will be given a one-way ticket out of town. And if that didn't do it, they did whatever they had available, and they did. My house was firebombed. They shot at me so many times, more than I can count. And then they sent us a $9,000 water bill, and we had no running water. And after this, what's the arrest?
And it was one of those harrowing arrests that affected you physically for the rest of your life and impacted the nation profoundly. Can you tell us about the 1964 Democratic Convention, Mrs. Hamer?
In 1962, I co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, MFDP, a new Democratic Party, one to properly represent the people. In my county alone, after 2.5 years of work to get blacks to register to vote, 155 out of 13,524 blacks had registered to vote, compared to 7,000 white registered voters. Me, Bob Mosley, and Ella Baker started our own party. And we went to the Democratic Convention to unseat and challenge the all-white delegates of the regular Democratic Party. There was 435,000 blacks in Mississippi, and not one black delegate. Now, how is that representation? We traveled 1,200 miles to Atlantic City. I sang all the way there. And we made quite the fuss, legally so, that the Credentials Committee decided to give us a hearing. When we arrived, they put us in this little closed room with no cameras. We were like, The lawyer shamed the reporters, and they were allowed to come into our room. So the Credentials Committee offered to give us a hearing. August 22nd, 1964, 2:55 p.m., the hearing started. The first witness was Aaron Henry and Ed King. They spoke about the danger we faced trying to get blacks to register to vote, how the places we convened in were burned to the ground, and the fact that we lacked representation wasn't due to lack of desire, but self-preservation. By now, it was my turn. I told them how 18 of us got on the bus and drove 26 miles to Indianola, and only 2 of us was allowed to go in. And on our way back, the bus was stopped And the bus driver got a ticket because the bus was the wrong color. I told him that the landowner told me I had to leave that very night if I didn't take my name off the voters' registration books. And how they shot 16 shots into my friend's house where I was staying. After a voter registration workshop, we stopped at this diner. We got off the bus to use the washroom and were kicked out. I jumped off the bus to see what was going on. We were all arrested. The details are gruesome, terribly horrific. But I had to live it all that day because the world needed to know how bad things were. I had a limp for the rest of my life. Lost sight in one eye. Had kidney damage that affected my health to my dying day. All this because we wanted to become first-class citizens. If the Freedom Democratic Party is not seated now, I question America. Is this America, the land of the free, the home of the brave, where we have to sleep with our telephones off the hook because our lives be threatened daily because we want to live as decent human beings in America? People were crying in the aisle, and so was I. It was hard to relive. But the country needed to know how bad it was. President Johnson knew that my words had power and that they could change people's minds, and he didn't want that. He even tried to stop us from getting to the convention in the first place. When I began my testimony, he called an emergency press conference, knowing that the news station would break away. But now, mind you, they didn't break away when Martin Luther King Jr. was giving his testimony. No, just mine. It was me that he feared. So they break away thinking that President Johnson was going to announce his pick for vice president. Instead, he announces that it was the 9th month anniversary of Kennedy's assassination. 9th month. Odd number, ain't it? And then he cut away. Yes, it backfired. Because he cut away, when people came home from work in the evening, the news station played my testimony over and over. And the whole country saw it, and the whole country was stunned.
Through all the setbacks and the violence, many would give up. Where did you find your strength?
My mama and God. Christ was a revolutionary person out there where it was happening. That's what God is all about. And that's where I get my strength. Christianity is not building a fancy church with people starving around the corner. It's about your fellow man. It's about the love, not hate. I don't hate. I can get angry. Yes, I can. My mama told me, hate or hating make you just as weak as those who hate you. And as a matter of fact, those who hate you are more scared than I was. As a matter of fact, they were scared to death.
Of what?
Change. Equality.
But isn't equality what we love most about our country?
On paper. But when it comes right down to it, they don't want change because that means that you would have to give up some of your power. And that's a hard thing to do.
Even after losing her fight for delegation seats, Mrs. Hamer inspired many with her testimony. The nation's outrage grew, and she became one essential spoke in the grand wheel, along with the marches of Selma to Montgomery, Dr. King, and John Lewis with the Freedom Riders, spinning towards one of history's major turning points.
August 6, 1965, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. And that is when all women and men technically got the right to vote. 55 years ago.
Powerful.
I see
Oh my
Pamela.
gosh.
Pamela, you just wrote, this should be shown in every classroom in America. Yeah. Yeah, so much of this.
You'll upset so many people. All the school boards in certain states will really raise a voice.
Oh, yeah.
I'm being very facetious, but it's terrible what's happening around the country. And, we have a lot of battles ahead if we want equity. So
we do.
Yeah.
Any comments out there from the Peanut Gallery that we haven't heard from on either answering the original question of why is this month important, or any comments about anything that you've seen or heard today so far?
If you look in the chat box, there are a couple of notations about things you might want to watch. Steph recommended PBS's Nova series, Picture of Scientist, about women in science. Priya talked about Strange Fruit, Billie Holiday. So look in the chat and you can see some of the links to those things.
Yeah.
There's another thing about just what she endured was horrific, and I feel like we're going backwards so much right now. We're lulled into this complacency, and huge swaths of the country want to go back to that idyllic time where she was beaten up and people were lynched. And
idyllic for who?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. They want to go back to making America great again. That was a great America right there. But there's one other thing that I put in the chat, but I don't think it went through. There's a monument in Montgomery, Alabama, called Mothers of Gynecology. If you guys can look that up and check that out. And it's just a very compelling story about how, she talked about having an involuntary hysterectomy. This one, there are 3 enslaved women who basically were in the household of a very famous surgeon who was called the father of gynecology, but he performed all these procedures on them without their consent, obviously, with no anesthesia. And just the idea that reproductive rights could be taken away over and over again, either to have children or to be able to choose when and if we have children. It's just so scary. Just please check out Mothers of Gynecology and the story behind that also. It's horrific.
Yeah. Thank you.
Those hysterectomies are going on in current time, or had been with the immigrants from the southern border, and I think it was Alabama or Mississippi. But there were several hysterectomies done on immigrants without the without the patient's permission, and very dubious reasons, and just horrible, absolutely horrible. So it's, the beat goes on, unfortunately. We are not very, very advanced in terms of, and I agree, we're sort of going backwards in many places. I don't know what it will take to really teach all of us the importance of seeing the humanity in all people. And I think that's, we categorize and then we're able to do terrible things to those who aren't in our category. It would seem.
Yeah.
The other.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. And it will take a revolution in thought, I think, in order to achieve a more equitable society. I mean, it's not just, it's interesting. I love this program. You did a tremendous job, I thought, putting this history of women together. And I thank everybody who worked so hard to do that.
Thank you.
But I've been pretty involved recently in studying, racism, and it's, there's so many people who just want to basically erase a whole group history because they think it's offensive to people to know and it's a very frightening time. So we really need to be very alert and very proactive in terms of what's happening in the educational realm, I think.
I saw Pamela had her hand up.
Yeah, Pamela.
Pamela, do you want to unmute yourself?
Okay. Yeah.
There you go.
There you are. Hi.
Oh, it was reminding me of Henrietta Lacks. Did you read the book?
Yes.
And all the inequities that we have performed on women forever.
Right.
And this was just appalling. It's still appalling. And I agree with, I'm sorry, the last speaker, when I heard, the other one, the other woman, I'm sorry, I don't know most of you.
I know.
Anyway, when I read about the performances on women at the border, it just was devastating. I thought, how could we be doing this when we did this before and we're still doing it? I don't know. I just also want to tell you, women, that you did an excellent job of putting this together. I think the whole thing should be shown to children. That's who we need to reach.
Right.
Yeah.
Selma has her hand up.
I was going to say, who?
Selma.
Eddie? Oh,
Selma.
Yeah, Selma. I'm in the peanut gallery. Enjoying this program very, very much. It's just wonderful. Patty, I really appreciated your presentation, and then the videos are wonderful. I don't know. I get concerned that we're so focused on trying to change big stuff and changing globally. I think that some of the greatest impact I ever had was the years when I taught second grade, because I don't care what the curriculum is. The things that were important to me got taught in that classroom. And I know that I'm not the only one. I taught my values to my children. We lived in an integrated area. It wasn't the smartest decision financially, but it was where I felt it was important to live. I'm Hispanic, and I didn't recognize how much discrimination I've been subjected to until years and years and years later in hindsight. But I find that there are ripples to we are as human beings, and to how we behave, and to how we act toward others. I'm better at blowing my own horn than I used to be, and I remember when I decided to go to law school in midlife. When I graduated from law school and I was looking for a job, I thought, how cool, I'll put my Hispanic middle name in there, and then I'll get all these offers for interviews. So I was Selma Lopez Mann. I didn't get one single call when I did that. I removed that middle name and I used my father's name instead. And
interesting.
I got calls.
Oh,
yeah.
And it wasn't until hindsight that I started to get these things together. But what my children learned because of my choices, they have passed on to others. My my grandson has gone to alternative schools his whole life. He would probably recognize the names of these women because this is how he was raised. What was important to me got rippled onto my family and rippled onto my friends, and then rippled onto my grandson, who's an amazing young man with a big voice and a very, he actually has to say, I want to express my opinion without having to worry that you're going to judge me because I'm not African American. You know, he is, it's just, the nuances of all of it that I don't think would exist in this young man, but for the way that he was raised. So I think that we just need to pat ourselves on the back because we have a lot more influence than we think we do. And it, it may not be obvious, but it's there. That was it for me.
Thanks, Selma.
Thank you, Selma. Thank you. And Patty, you want to talk a little bit now about the Women's Journey Foundation?
Yeah,
what all you do?
Yeah, our girls program, like I said, is one of our highlights. We put a lot of focus, and someone had put in, I think it was Priya, about Virginia Apgar, and one of our
it was Joyce, I think.
Yeah, I did it.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
It was Joyce.
Yeah, we portrayed her in one of our plays, along with Judge Sotomayor, but they were little girls portraying the roles of little girls as Virginia Apgar and Sotomayor, and how they had aspirations. And so thank you for bringing her name into it, because I really have fond appreciation. I just wanted to also bring up, we have these beautiful flashcards. And on the flip side, it tells you about who these women were, what they did, how they did it, and why. So we send these out to grade school teachers, and some of them are using them in their classrooms, which is really, a nice thing. I also wanted to bring up, with our reproductive rights at stake, I did not know this, and I was embarrassed that I didn't know this, that I thought that Roe v. Wade was the law of the land. What I didn't know, it was a precedent. It was not a law.
Right.
So I questioned after that, like, well, why did it take us so long to make it a law?
It still isn't.
It
Still not a law.
It's just a Supreme Court decision.
Exactly.
So Congress has not stepped up to the plate in 50 years.
Right. So I find that puzzling and really discouraging.
Distressing. Very distressing.
Very distressing. Yes.
So our idea at the Women's Journey Foundation is to provide a legacy, a lineage, because we women here in American history, we do not have a lineage. You can look into it. When I think about a lineage, I think about Abigail Adams. One of the, a lot of people forget that her letters was the actual direct eyewitness to the Revolutionary War, which is used in our textbooks, right? And she was the first one to address the newly formed Continental Congress. Don't forget about the ladies. Why did she say that? Because I think she knew that there was a major divide of how women were represented even then. And she was an advocate for women's public education. A lot of people don't know that about her. They think of her as the first lady. There's so much more. She was a very successful entrepreneur when women couldn't own their own businesses. So, it's like, I always encourage people to look, be curious, do the research. And that's why we are really bound to determine that we want to build this museum here in Orange County. We are always looking for mentors because we are a multi-generational approach. We are always looking for grant writers. When you build a museum, it's going to be costly. We need grant writers. We need an expanded board of directors. We need making HerStory committee to do the research and the recommendations so we can continue doing these performances and inviting more people into this. And then I think that's pretty much it. But if you do want to get involved, I put the website in the chat earlier on today. We could use your help. I'm a fond I have a fond appreciation for AAUW and all that you do. I love educators. We need you. So if you're interested, please contact me, and we could definitely find a place for you.
Yeah, there were some in the chat who are interested in participating. So
great,
get their names and move forward. Joyce,
I was just going to ask if we could put the information about the museum and the foundation in our news blast so we can reach everybody.
Yes.
And really, because I'm sure there are a lot of people who would volunteer.
Yeah. Alice and I will work on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Patty, we're so happy to have you be a part of this and share just a little bit of the Her Story. And, go out onto, I'm speaking to the other attendees, go out onto Women's Journey Foundation website and you can watch the whole program. And it's all very interesting. It was well done, and they did it in 3 days. 3 days when you see the entire program and what went into it. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
We had a hard time choosing which to show you today because if you see it all, it's 2 hours long, and there are like 14 or 15 women that they highlight. So it's worth watching in little segments to see all the rest of the work that Patty and her foundation have done.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. And Sigrid, would you like to do a little wrap up by giving us the last comments of Michaela and her opinion?
So at the end of Michaela's editorial, she says, as we work towards women's equality, education is holding us back. Here in 2021, young women are told we can make history and achieve anything, but that's difficult to believe when history curriculums marginalize or ignore women's accomplishments. When these facts are omitted from compulsory education, it becomes more difficult for students to see how gender-based inequalities remain entrenched, which in turn will make it harder for us to escape them. If your response to, should history curriculums include women, is well, duh, well, good for you. I hope that my generation can reach the point where, well, duh, is ubiquitous, and that one day I can laugh at the memory of my 7-year-old self asking such a ridiculous question.
Thank you, Sigrid. And thank you to everyone who has attended. We appreciate you being here and being a part of our program.
And we have recorded this, and we will figure out a way for that link to be available to the membership, so that tell your friends to look in the news blast next time, and we'll have a way for them to watch today's show as well as the links to all of the other Women's Journey Foundation videos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right.
That was such a good program.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad you joined us.
Ladies.
Thanks.